Hello, everybody. Welcome to this class about just a revision class from our classes 23 to 30. So we are well into microeconomics now. We spent the first part of the course looking at basic things like supply and demand. And then in these classes from 23 to 30, we talked about when the market doesn't work. So what are the reasons for the very simple idea of the market we presented in the earlier classes? Why might this not work? So I want to just give a little bit of revision on the key points for this and point you in the direction of where you should go and do some further work as well. So remember, you have your class plan. I have many videos linked to the class plan. You also have the textbooks and so on. Please look at these things and come back with me if there's any questions. Okay, where are we overall? So microeconomics, we have started, this was our first part here. The first part, how do consumers and producers make choices in trying to meet their economic objectives? We talked about demand, the law of demand, when the price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Be very careful in your terminology. The same for supply. Supply and demand intersect. This gives us our competitive market equilibrium. We also talked about things like elasticities. We have price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and price elasticity of substitution. Or sorry, price elasticity of supply, sorry. So basically, this measures the responsiveness of demand or of quantity demand to changes in price. And this, it's here, it's the responsiveness of the quantity demand to changes in income. So for these things here, make sure you know the sign. Why is it always negative? What's inelastic? What's elastic demand? Have examples. Same for here for supply. Be able to draw the different types of supply curve. And also for income, then know what a normal good is, know what an inferior good is, and so on. Then, be able to talk about why this maximizing behavior of consumers and producers, why do we not believe it? Why does it not always work? And there's things we looked at. We talked about consumers not being very rational, people buying too much of things. And we also looked at the example in Ireland where the panic during the coronavirus, people go and start spending, buying their Christmas presents in September, things like that. So that was the first part. And then in our second part now, we started looking at these things. When are the governments able to satisfy important economic objectives? And we talked a little bit as well about what governments can do to help. So as a general rule, economics, we say government should stay out. The first best is always let the free markets work. But sometimes when the free markets don't work, when there is some sort of market failure, then economists will say there is a role for governments in the market. Now, this video here will not go into the role of the government. I'll make another video about that and share that before the end of the week, maybe share that before Thursday's class. But today I just want us to focus on what actually causes the market failures. And you'll see lots of different things here. Some of this is coming later. All this monopoly, oligopoly, perfect competition. We're going to be doing this later on, monopolistic competition as well. Today we just focus on, or so far we just focus on market failure. So it can be caused by public goods. We did this in the last class. Public goods, because of their characteristics, the non-excludable, non-rivalrous, nobody wants to pay for them. Why should I pay for a street light? Why should it be any of us? So we all sit back and we don't pay for it. We end up with no street light. So there's a role for the government to go and provide the street light or the lighthouse or something like that. We talked about externalities. We talked about common access resources, tragedy of the commons. There's also, and then basically we also talked about merit goods and demerit goods as well. We'll talk about these things here in the future, the market failure, asymmetric information, and so on. And yeah, and that's what we're going to do. So market failure. Anytime the price mechanism does not deliver this, what is this? The marginal social cost and marginal social benefit. Anytime equilibrium is not where the social cost is equal to the social benefit. Now, the problem, we get a lot of externalities because a lot of firms don't take into account their full costs. They don't take into account that they have some external social costs. They only take into their private costs. So they operate on a cost curve to the right of this here. And so we don't end up at this point B. A lot of consumers as well might not take into account the positive or negative externalities that they use. But overall speaking, a market works when we have equilibrium at something like point B, when the consumer and the producer surplus is maximized. And a market fails when we don't do this. So a very, very strict definition. Whenever we don't achieve this equilibrium, there is a market failure. The market has not delivered the efficient outcome or the allocative efficiency of the market. When are markets unable to satisfy the important economic objectives of this? Well, so far we've talked about externalities, the common access resources, and the public goods. So we're going to just dig into these in the next few pages. Externalities can result either from the consumption or production of goods and services, and they create a gap or difference between the MPC and the MSC, or between the MPB and the MSB. Guys, practice drawing the diagrams. It's the only way to get to know this. You need to practice drawing the diagrams. In other words, an externality occurs when the free market leads to an outcome where MPB is equal to MPB equal to MPC, but MSB is not equal to MSC, MSC not equal to MSC, MSB not equal to MSC, and the outcome for society is allocative inefficiency. So whenever we don't have this, we've allocative efficiency. So an externality occurs when essentially we set the private costs. So MPB is the marginal private cost. We set the private costs equal, but not the social costs. So we ignore the external cost. We just look at and remember the social cost or the social benefit is basically the private plus the external. And if we ignore the external, we end up with this allocative efficiency. There are 4 types of externalities. All negative externalities of production and consumption. So there's positive, negative, production, consumption. So 4 different externalities. All negative externalities of production and consumption create external costs. When there's an external cost, the marginal social cost is greater than the marginal social benefit at the equilibrium point of the market. Draw this out. If there's an external cost, what is an external cost? It's a negative externality. The MSC is greater than the MSB at the equilibrium point of the market. All positive externalities create external benefits. So whether they're production and consumption. So if there's an external benefit, then the MSB is greater than the MSC at the equilibrium point of the market. So what does this mean? This means you're leaving, you can capture more benefit by producing more. Again, draw it out. You'll see the little dot, the triangle that you're leaving behind here. And here you'll see the triangle of loss. So practice those things. We're going to be talking about it the next day in class. All production externalities create a divergence between private and social costs. MPC is not equal to MSC. All consumption externalities create a divergence between private and social benefits. MPB is not equal to MSB. So these 2 ways here are just 2 different ways of looking at it, okay? When you have a negative externality, whether it's production or consumption, you produce too much. When you have a positive externality, you produce too little, so you're leaving some benefit behind. All production externalities hit the supply curve. It creates a divergence between private and social costs. All consumption externalities hit the demand curve. It creates a divergence between private and social benefits. The other thing, merit goods. Merit goods are private goods. That's key word, they're private goods. They're not public goods. Merit goods are private goods that will be underproduced by the market as consumers do not appreciate the benefits to themselves and society of their consumption. So we don't fully appreciate the benefits to ourselves and society of their consumption. As a result, they are underprovided by the market because firms are profit-driven and only produce goods and services for consumers who can pay for them. So we're not willing to pay the right price for these goods. So our demand curve is not as strong as what it should be. And as a result, these goods become underprovided because firms, they want profit. They will provide the good if there's a high enough price for it. But if it's not, they won't. As these goods will be underconsumed, they will be underprovided with respect to the socially optimal output, and this creates a market failure. So another form of market failure. Merit goods are goods that are considered beneficial to both the individual and society as a whole, as in the cases of education and healthcare. So make sure you know what merit goods are, and make sure you can draw this here in a diagram. Essentially, it's a positive externality of consumption that is ignored. Demerit goods are private goods that will be overconsumed and therefore overprovided by the market for the exact same reason that merit goods would be underprovided. Consumers do not appreciate the costs to them and the society of their consumption. Firms are profit-driven, so the market will produce and consume based on the forces of supply and demand. As these goods will be overconsumed, they'll be oversupplied with respect to the socially optimal output, so they will also create a market failure. Demerit goods are considered to be harmful for both the individual and the society as a whole, as in the case of cigarettes and alcohol. So the merit good just creates negative externalities. And these goods end up being overproduced, because consumers don't appreciate the cost and we end up demanding too much. We don't realize the likes of cigarettes and alcohol. When people consume them, they don't realize the damage it's doing to themselves. They also don't realize or take into account the damage that could be done to society. I like this table. I showed the last day. I think it's a really good summary then of the 4 types of goods in terms of the general. So basically, we have 4 types of goods in economics. We have private goods, and of course, merit good is a type of private good. We have private goods, public goods. As I said in the last video, when I was studying, it was just private goods and public goods. Now we've got these 2 other characteristics as well. So I'm not going to go through this thing, but know what rivalrous, know what non-rivalrous is, know what these things are here, and be able to give examples of each. I really like the example of streetlights for public goods. As I said, for club goods, I don't like the idea of park bench. I prefer a toll road. And private good, it can be anything. An apple, it can be chocolate bar, kebab even. Let's pick something different. We're always picking kebab. And then non-excludable and rivalrous. This is the fish in the ocean. Okay, guys, thank you. I hope that gave you a good overview of what we did in those classes. I will have another video on government, and then we'll talk more about this and look at the diagrams on Thursday. Thank you.